Hey guys, welcome to another 72 DPI video. Today we are talking about my top 10 favorite cards from M21. These are cards that I'm looking forward to brewing with. These are cards that I have decks that I've already created that I'm looking forward to inserting into those already existing decks. And you know, there's just some cards in here that I just kind of want to play around with and have some fun. Um, so, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into today's video. These are in no particular order, so we're just going to go ahead and start right at the top here. Transmogrify. This card reminds me very much so of another card that I've already got a deck created around and kind of built around, but Transmogrify is 1 red, 3 generic for a rare sorcery. It says exile target creature. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. That player puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles the rest into their library. So the card that this reminds me of is called Possibility Storm, and I've got a deck already created around this, where the deck basically consists of red spells and blue spells that draw and let you search for cards. There's also some white cards in there as well, basically allowing you to tutor and draw and search for cards throughout your deck. There's also some control spells in there. But what Possibility Storm says is pretty much the same thing as Transmogrify, just a little bit different. It's an enchantment that costs 2 red and 3 generic. It's a rare. And it says, whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it, then exiles cards from the top of his or her library until he or she exiles a card that shares a card type with it. That player may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then he or she puts all cards exiled with Possibility Storm on the bottom of his or her library in a random order. So essentially what this is doing is Transmogrify allows you to target a creature, exile that creature, and then whoever owns that, whoever's the controller of that creature, basically from the top of their deck starts pulling cards until they pull another creature, and that creature enters the battlefield. Um, Possibility Storm does the same thing, except for card type, and it's across all players. Whereas Transmogrify, I control it. I can target my creature or target my opponent's creature. In this deck, I will only be targeting my creatures, because the way the deck is set up, there are only 2 creatures in the deck. One is Ornithopter here, which is a 0-costed mana creature. 0-costed creature costs that's a 0/2 with flying. That doesn't make any difference. The reason why it's in there is because it costs 0. There's only 1 copy. And what happens is, if I have Possibility Storm out, I will play Ornithopter, and instead of casting Ornithopter, I will mill my deck until I find Emrakul. And then Emrakul comes into play on turn 5. So this right here, what we're looking at with Transmogrify, is essentially the same thing. Instead, I play Ornithopter for free on turn 4, and then cast Transmogrify on Ornithopter, and then basically exile cards till I get to Emrakul. So it works identical in that sense. There are a few differences, though. Obviously, with Possibility Storm, it works with all players, so it has a little bit of like pseudo protection. And by that I mean, if I were to, originally play Possibility Storm and then cast, Ornithopter, they could counter the Ornithopter spell, right? So, but when the player casts their counter spell, they too would also, exile cards until they got to another instant card, which in some cases would be another counter spell, or in some cases it might be a different instant card in their deck. So it has kind of like a pseudo protection ability. So Transmogrify isn't, while it's a turn quicker, it's not nearly as protected when it comes to being compared to Possibility Storm. So really what this card brings to this deck is just 4 more copies of Possibility Storm Light, I guess is what I'd call it. So we'll be able to work those in there and definitely have some fun with it. Let's see here. Next up is Stormwing Entity. This card is kind of interesting, and I've got a deck that I have already built that I might try to fit into it. There's also some other archetypes that this fits in really well with. This is a 3/3 elemental that costs 2 blue and 3 generic. So you might be thinking, holy smokes, that's really expensive. But it costs 2 colorless and 1 blue less if you've already casted an instant or sorcery spell this turn. It also has flying, and it also has prowess, which prowess, again, to kind of remind everybody, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So non-creature could be an instant sorcery, planeswalker, artifact, enchantment, as long as it's not another creature. And this ability stacks on top of itself. And then it also has, when it enters the battlefield, you get to scry 2. So the deck that I'm considering trying this out in, and I use the word trying out loosely because the only way it's going to work is if we can get it to get it down to the basically the two mana cost, 1 blue, 1 colorless version of this, and that's in my Blister Coil deck. Blister Coil, I call it I call it Blister Coil Storm because I end up casting a bunch of instants and sorceries in this deck to kind of build up Blister Coil. To kind of give you an idea, Blister Coil is a 1/1 for either 1 blue or 1 red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Blister Coil gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Untap it. The untap part is very important because I pair this with Paradise Mantle, and that's a 0-costed artifact that gives the Blister Coil the ability to tap for 1 mana of any color. So, the way this works is I tap the Blister Coil for 1 mana with the Paradise Mantle already equipped, cast a 1 mana, 1 converted mana costed instant or sorcery, the Blister Coil untaps, and I can cast another one. And basically it's a repeatable ability as long as what I'm casting is one casting cost or less, or nets me an extra mana. For example, some spells will give you mana back for casting them, which is nice. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. So I'm always looking for ways to add evasion to Blister Coil. So giving it flying or giving it double strike or whatever, make it unblockable, things like that. Or there's some spells that are in this deck already that exist. However, adding maybe 1 or 2 Stormwing entities into this deck might give me another avenue to get a victory, since it already has flying built in. The prowess trigger is very similar to Blister Coil. Actually, it's better than Blister Coil because it actually will it'll actually activate like when I play a Paradise Mantle for free. Whereas if I draw a Paradise Mantle, that's not going to trigger my Blister Coil weird, but it will trigger the entity. So there's some pluses and minuses. The other thing that the Stormwing Entity brings to the table is the scrying ability. That's nice because I can, I don't need a lot of lands, or I can sift through the top 2 cards and really kind of set up my next couple turns or my next couple plays. And it's just, and the thing is, I don't know if it's going to work out or not because of its expense. Even if it's only costing 2 mana, the untap ability of Blister Coil is really kind of the bread and butter of the deck. But there is a prowess deck that I would like to build, and I know that this would be a great addition to that deck. So either way, if it doesn't work out, this is still going into this deck or going into a newer prowess deck. Moving on, this See the Truth is another card that I think I might test out in that same Blister Coil deck. It's a sorcery speed spell that's a rare. It costs 1 blue, 1 generic. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. If this spell is cast anywhere other than your hand, put each of those cards into your hand instead. So the other couple, I have 2 other ways to cast spells from my graveyard, one of which is Passed into Flames, which allows you to cast a spell or cast spells from your graveyard. So this is just a great way to just draw more cards. Any ability in this deck to draw more cards is always a win, whether it's 1 card or 3 cards. 1 card for 2 mana is a little on the rough side. It's a little expensive, especially with the way we have Paradise Mantle Blister Coil set up, where I'm only getting 1 mana per turn. But if I'm drawing 3 cards, this could be very well be a great setup. So again, it might be a testing type of card. If it doesn't work out, this would definitely go into the prowess deck for sure. Next up, we have Terror from the Peaks and Sporeweb Weaver. These are actually all 3 of these cards are in the new set, but I'm really excited to build around this. I've got a Gruul deck that's just waiting for some type of combo pieces like this. Heroic Intervention's already in that deck to begin with, so I really don't need to worry too much about that. Terror from the Peaks is the card that everybody's talking about, so, you know, it is what it is, guys. It looks like a great card to play with. It's very terrifying. It's a 5/4 for 2 red, 3 generic at Mythic Rare. It has flying. It also has protection in the form of spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. So at the very least, you're lightning bolting your opponent when they try to target this. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. And that's where Sporeweb Weaver comes into play. So, Sporeweb Weaver is a 1 green, 2 generic, 1/4 spider. It's got reach, hexproof from blue, and whenever it's dealt damage, you gain 1 life and you create a 1/1 green sapling token creature. So you kind of see where this is going. You've got the Weaver on the battlefield, you play Terror from the Peaks, and then the next time you play a creature, Terror from the Peaks deals 1 damage, or deals damage equal to the power to the spider, which then creates a 1/1 token, and you basically deal 1 damage from Terror of the Peaks from that 1/1 to a Spellweaver, and essentially you can do this 4 times before the spider dies. However, if you can use Heroic Intervention, you can give your permanents hexproof and indestructible until on a turn. That indestructible is what's going to save your spider so that you can continuously build an infinite number of 1/1 tokens. So the nice thing about this is you can change the target, so you can stop the infinite loop, so you don't have to keep. So like when a 1/1 creature, your 1/1 spider comes into play, or sapling token comes into play, you don't have to target the Weaver. You can just target another sapling token or whatever and just end the actual loop there when you have all the tokens you need. But this is just a really fun little loop. Terror from the Peaks by itself is a fantastic card, but having this infinite combo in here really kind of makes for some interesting interactions, whether that's giving all those creatures haste, or flinging those creatures, or having a sack outlet, whatever the case may be. It's a good combo to use. So looking forward to building that into my Gruul deck. So next up is another deck that I've come to love, and that's my Soul Sisters deck. I've got a blue-white Soul Sisters deck that has uses blue for some protection and things like that, so it's not your run-of-the-mill style of Soul Sisters deck, but there's 2 cards that are coming up in this M21 set that I would like to test out and see how it works. So first up, we have Speaker of the Heavens, and then we have Idol of Endurance. So Speaker of the Heavens, I think, is going to be the better fit. It's a 1 mana, 1/1 human cleric at rare. It has vigilance and lifelink, but more important is its activated ability. You can tap it to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. There's 2 caveats though. You can only activate this if you have 7 life more than your starting total. So in Modern's case, 27 life, which is perfectly capable, which the deck is perfectly capable of getting to relatively quickly. You know, turn 1, turn 2, in most cases you're at 27 life if the deck's performing as intended, or at least at like half capacity. The other thing is you can only activate this ability when you can cast a sorcery, which kind of, it stinks because you can't do it like in response to an attack or in response to a wrath or anything like that. But the reason why I like this card is not only is it easy to activate in the deck, but having a 4/4 flyer to help win the game is kind of where the deck struggles, right? It can get, up to some ridiculous level of life fairly, and with no infinite combos or anything like that. And the problem with this deck is ending games, because a lot of the cards in here in my deck are very small creatures. I've added a couple larger creatures, Sublime Archangel, things like that, to help mitigate the the issue towards the late game. But this will just be another way to create unlimited number as long as this creature doesn't die, obviously. But if you can untap and untap with this creature at least once and get that 4/4 angel out, you're looking pretty good. You tap it multiple times, you're doing even better. As far as the idol, on the other hand, this is another issue that comes up from time to time, is recursion. Having my creatures enter the battlefield, do what they're supposed to do, and then chump block with them, or they just die, and then they're pretty much waste from there. The Idol of Endurance allows me to exile all my creature cards with a converted mana cost 3 or less from my graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield. So this costs 3 mana, 1 blue, or excuse me, 1 white, 2 generic to cast, and then it has an activated ability of 1 white, 1 colorless. Tap it. Until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell from among cards exiled with Idol of Endurance without paying its mana cost. So, looking through the deck, I've got several 3 mana, 1 mana, and 2 mana casting creatures. So obviously, the Soul Wardens and the Soul's Attendants, those when they hit the battlefield, they're our primary way of gaining life. Once they die, we kind of run out of gas. So this is a great way to get them back into the battlefield if they get exiled early, or if we use like our biggest threats are Serra's Ascendance, which is a 1/1 for 1. If we have 30 life or more, it becomes a 6/6 lifelink flyer. So for 1 mana, that's coming back into play. That's great. Our Martyr of Sands giving us recursion with her. She's kind of another way that we gain just a load of life really quickly. All the cards in our deck are white, even the blue cards. We have split cards and gold cards that include white just to benefit from Martyr of Sands. And then Silverblade Paladin is another creature that we can get back with the idol. It's a 3 mana 2/2 creature with Soul Bond, and it gives a creature that Soul Bonds with double strike. So this is kind of the way that we use to get through our damage with our Serra's Ascendance, right? So Serra's Ascendance is a 6/6 when turned on. With Silverblade Paladin is dealing 12 damage. So this is basically our win condition, with this idol. So I'm thinking of what we could do to lower our curve is remove some of those higher costed creatures that we use to close out the game. That way we can use Silverblade Paladin and Serra's Ascendance, because they're very quickly to be removed and killed because of the sheer power. Using the idol to bring those back and have recursion. So next up, this is a deck that I'm kind of interested. I don't know how well it's going to go, but it's definitely piqued my interest. This is the Shrine series or Shrine cycle from the new M21 set. There are 5 shrines, 1 of each color, and they all do something different. They're all pretty. The casting costs they're pretty competitively costed, so that's a plus. The black one is really kind of one that I'm looking at that I'm really enjoying. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life, and then you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. This is kind of how all these work. The blue one draws you cards. The red one deals damage to creatures or planeswalkers. The green one gains you mana. The white one taps down creatures, and they all change based on how many shrines you control. Now, the problem is they're legendary enchantments, so you can only have 1 in play of that color at a time. But the benefit is, in Modern, they have reprinted and they have the original printing of the shrines from the Kamigawa block. So you have 2 of each color. They all do something different. These ones are a little bit more expensive as far as casting cost goes, but there's still some benefit here. So like the blue one allows you to draw a card for each shrine you control, although it costs 5. The red one deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of shrines you control. So that one costs 3. So that would be a good way to end the game real quick. The white one's allowing you to gain 2 life for every shrine you control. The black one makes them discard cards, and then the green one just gives you 1/1 spirit creature tokens for each shrine you control, and that's at your upkeep. So it could be a lot of fun. The one thing that really has me kind of peaked as far as building this deck is now you have access in Modern to 10 shrines, right? And obviously you wouldn't play 4 copies of each. You would kind of divvy up what you're trying to do and maybe only play a couple of each. And that way you don't run into, multiple copies or whatever in a single game. But having some type of way to sift cards from your hand back into your library, or discard to draw, kind of looting abilities, things like that, to kind of get to the ones that you're trying to buy or trying to cast. But the one thing that has this deck going for it is the rare shrine, which is 1 mana of each color. It too is a shrine, so this would be the 11th shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library and or graveyard for a shrine card and put it on the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you have 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. So this allows you to basically draw twice as many cards with the blue one, drain for multiple damage with the black one, all sorts of shenanigans can be played. These are enchantments, so you can put like Idyllic Tutor in there to kind of search up certain enchantments from your deck. I know they just reprinted that card, so it originally was like a $20-some card or $30 card. That probably brought it down. I'm not 100% sure, but again, drawing mechanics and different looting abilities and things like that. Large defense creatures to kind of fend off your early attacks for the fair decks or for the aggro decks. That's something that I'm kind of interested to build. Is it going to be easy, or is it going to be I think it'll at least be inexpensive, because this is a pretty, you pretty much have to go all in on these shrines. So we'll see. I'm kind of interested to see how it goes. So the last couple cards here are kind of one-offs. Let's see here. Conspicious Snoop is next. This is a 2/2 red goblin for 2 red mana. You can play with the top card of your library. So you play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast a goblin spell from the top of your library, and then as long as the top card of your library is a goblin, Conspicious Snoop has all activated abilities of that card. So already, this card's been broken with the Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker combo, where you basically can make infinite Conspicious Snoops with Kiki Jiki on top of your deck, and then basically you can sacrifice them to some type of sack outlet, so something like Sling Gang Lieutenant, where you make infinite of the Snoops, and then you sacrifice the Snoop, each of the Snoops, to deal 1 damage, and then you gain 1 life. So it's kind of a pretty it's a well-known combo. It works really well too. But what I'm kind of curious is what type of goblins out there have activated abilities that would make this deck kind of fun. Clearly, you can win on turn 4 with this deck. But again, this deck, with the mana cost, or the mana base, and the creatures and all that, it's like a $500 to $600 deck. I want to see what a budget deck version looks like, and kind of build it from there. So I'm kind of interested to see what that's like. Next up, this card, is it Maleficent Scythe? This card just really kind of piqued my interest. Like, I've never really seen a card like this before. It's 1 black, 1 generic artifact equipment. It enters the battlefield with a soul counter on it, and then equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each soul counter on it. So the first creature you put on it, gets +1/+1. Whenever equipped creature dies, put a soul counter on the Scythe. So it grows as the creatures die. It's got an equip cost of 1. So I'm really interested to see how this card plays out in kind of like aristocrats style deck, where you're sacrificing your own opponent or your own creatures to gain effects and abilities and advantages just from the creatures that are in, whether it's drawing cards or whether it's draining your opponent or forcing your opponent to discard or sacrifice creatures like that. That's kind of what the aristocrat deck is built around. You know, you sacrifice one of your creatures, and it negatively impacts your opponent in more than one way, whether that's, like I said, drawing or discarding, sacrificing, or draining, or whatever the case may be. This is just another way to gain value out of that deck. And maybe at the end of the day, after you've sacrificed enough things, cleared the board, your actual creature that's holding the scythe is, +5/+5, +6/+6, or whatever the case may be, and you can just end the game out there. Another win condition for those types of decks and things like that. So I'm interested in building around this. I don't currently have a deck for it to slot into, so this is something that I'll have to start from scratch. And kind of along the same lines, and actually probably in the same deck, is Archfiends Vessel. This is a 1/1 human cleric for 1 black mana. It has lifelink, but the ability that has me kind of peaked about it is when it enters the battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, exile it. If you do, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying. So again, one of the downfalls of those aristocrat style decks is a lot of times they're 1/1s and 2/2s and in some cases 3/3s, and there's some oddities out there where they get a little bit bigger to close out the game. This is a way for you to gain a 5/5 black demon creature, and if you have the Scythe in play, to give it even more of a buff. So again, another card that I'm interested to play and just kind of want to build around. The other thing that you can build around is with this, in the way you can take advantage of it is returning creatures from your graveyard. In Standard right now, there's 2 cards that allow you to do that. Of course, Standard isn't going to include M20 for very much longer, but it's in there. So you've got Blood for Bones and you've got Call of the Death Dweller. These both allow you to bring creatures back from the graveyard to the battlefield, which will trigger Vessel's second ability. So if you go back to Modern, you get even more card options when it comes to different spells that bring cards back to the battlefield. So again, great card. Looking forward to brewing with it and building around it, and just kind of, like I said, I think it slots very well into like the aristocrats style deck. Alright guys, well I really appreciate you watching. That's the list for today. Again, top 10 favorite cards from M21. Thanks for watching. Make sure you get subscribed for more MTG content. I really appreciate that. And then leave a comment below. I'm kind of interested to see what your guys' favorite cards are. What are you looking to brew with? What kind of cards, kind of piqued your interest and you have kind of some plans for. Leave those in the comments below, and then also don't forget to click the like button on your way out. We will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.